Around the nation, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Welcome to the show. We have continuing coverage of what's going on with Iowa. Also, an update on what the Republicans plan to do post-impeachment of President Trump, or I should say post-acquittal. So this is an interesting story as well. We've got that. We've got Bernie Sanders surrogate Nina Turner versus Mike Bloomberg. That's always fun. We've got a lot of pressure on Tom Perez to resign. And again, like I said, we've got some updates on Iowa, and they are infuriating. So, yeah, we had a little bit of an interesting day today. We had a stream earlier, actually, that was talking about basically Mayor Pete. And so what happened there is that Pete basically declared himself the winner of Iowa before any of the results had come out. And then, of course, it came out that Pete's campaign gave money to the developer of the app that was used in Iowa, the app that failed. Update on that actually is now Nevada was scheduled to use that app. They are no longer using it. So that's good news. So they're no longer going to use that app in Nevada. So that's one potential time bomb that has been avoided. And then we have, of course, we find out more and more about this company called Shadow. Now, the company called Shadow created that app. That's funded by Buttigieg. Also, apparently funded by Joe Biden. And then also a possible Democratic dark money super PAC. And then a billionaire that backs Buttigieg as well. And so that's really strange stuff. So now Buttigieg comes back later and says, "Oh, I didn't actually mean that I won Iowa. No. It was a victory that I could bring out so many people." Well, look, we don't even know, right? We still don't have any of the results. And so that is, of course, going to segue into the story that I'm going to talk about. So let's get into it. It appears we'll have an update on what happened in Iowa in the Iowa caucus and who won. But we will have that update at 5 o'clock. And it'll only be 50% of the results. I'm not kidding. So this is what's coming out of the Iowa Democratic Party. It's being reported that the Iowa Democratic Party, in a call with the candidates' campaigns, has announced it released the majority of the results from the more than 1,700 precincts at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. It is currently 3 p.m., which is when we go with the live show. So, look, by the time this is over, we'll have only 50% of the results. So, wait, why can't we get 100% of the results? What is going on in Iowa? Why is it taking so long? So there's a lot of misinformation going around, including rumors that Joe Biden's team had was filing an injunction to stop the rest of the results from getting out. Now, that is, of course, fueled by the idea that he may be coming in fourth or fifth, which would be disastrous for Joe Biden's campaign and would essentially mean or be a death knell to his campaign. We'll see when the actual official results come out. But then you have, of course, Elizabeth Warren, possibly in third or fourth. And then Pete Buttigieg, I'm guessing, will be at number 2. So, again, we don't know. Buttigieg could be at number 1. We don't have the official results. What we do have, though, is the results of internal polling inside of the campaign. So now Bernie Sanders' campaign released his internal polling and had it about the final results. Pete Buttigieg is around 25%, but then you had Bernie Sanders around 28, 29%. Now, he would be the clear winner in Iowa. But hey, look at that. Pete Buttigieg, a very strong second, which means he would come away with a lot of the delegates. But more importantly, that would continue the life of his campaign. And so it was very important for Pete Buttigieg to be in the top two. Now, obviously, being the winner would be the best situation, be the best scenario for him. But sans that, at least being in number two would still allow Pete Buttigieg to say that he is a viable candidate and maybe possibly get some of the Biden donors. And so that's kind of what I think this is all about, at least on that. But man, we don't know. Now, Buttigieg released his own numbers earlier, and he was around 25% as well for the final tally. So again, that's the internal numbers. So it's very likely that Bernie Sanders is going to come out with a victory on this. But see, the problem is, it's not just about like winning Iowa. There are 41 delegates. Those delegates are obviously important. Every delegate is. But in the total grand scheme of things, it's not quite as important as winning, for example, like Super Tuesday, right? Being the winner there and taking a majority of those delegates. In fact, again, Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg are probably going to come away likely, at least if these internal polls hold, with the same amount of delegates or a similar amount of delegates. And I've also seen reports of coin tosses where, Bernie Sanders had over 100 people, Buttigieg having like 30, and then getting an equal share of delegates. And that's craziness. And that's, if that's true, that's complete and total insanity and not how you're supposed to run an election and apportion delegates fairly. But again, without the official numbers, there's not a whole lot we can do other than speculate. And of course, I've talked about the app failing, the app created by Shadow, which is it's almost as bad as Fraud Guarantee. So you're gonna contract a company named Shadow, right, to count election results, and you're gonna do it behind closed doors. There's a report that came out 4 days earlier, which talked all about all of this, and it actually didn't get a lot of media attention. In fact, I wasn't even aware of it until recently, and so until about last night when this became incredibly relevant. We had no idea, and they're saying, "Hey, no, we can't talk about our app that we have developed that they're going to use in Iowa because it would be super unfair to the company, right? It would be super unfair to us." And so we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to give away trade secrets. We're not going to make it easier for easy for example, foreign government to go and hack into the app and whatever, do whatever with the results. Well, yeah, that kind of blew up in their face. Not the fact that, any results are changed, the fact that it's taking so long to get results in the first place, in which it's really important for a candidate post Iowa because this is the first in the nation, and whether you agree with that or not, this is still true. This still holds true that if you win Iowa, the press bump is really, really important because believe it or not, human nature kind of dictates that when you have a winner of a specific race, I'm not talking like race, but like or a contest or an election, whatever, that people tend to side with the winner. And then that draws more attention, that draws more votes to your side, etc. And so not only did Bernie Sanders miss out on that, but if Pete Buttigieg had won, Buttigieg also missed out on that. And now there is a cloud hanging over, once again, any election, any primary going forward. So great. So now we can't trust any of our elections. Now it's good that Nevada is no longer planning to use this app, but the damage is kind of already done. And now it feels just like 2016 all over again. And so as we await these results, all we can think about is this situation. We've seen this before. We've been here before. It seems like it's either incompetence or shenanigans, but the overall result is the same. We no longer trust the vote. And that, again, is pretty scary. Now, good thing about Iowa is they do have paper ballot backups, so we'll get accurate numbers. But right now, it's just a waiting. I think that's fueling the most speculation and is the worst part about the entire thing. So, yeah. Paper ballots, please. All right. Shadow. Moving on here. Oh, yeah. I guess we'll get that Trump story out of the way, or a Republican story. With the soon-to-be acquittal of President Donald Trump in his impeachment trial, Republicans are now arguing amongst themselves of whether or not that they should launch a bunch of useless investigations against Democrats. So now, first, who they're targeting or who they're arguing about is the whistleblower. So now, earlier today, Rand Paul again publicly outed the name of the whistleblower. Now, what's funny is that Rand Paul is quoted in this story, and I'm going to show the hypocrisy between his words and his actions. But first, let me get to the Washington Post, who reported this is Rachel Bade of the Washington Post saying that there was a possible revolt brewing in the GOP caucus against Senator Lindsey Graham. Now, the reason that they're going after Senator Lindsey Graham, as they explain, is that he has stated his desire to encourage the heads of various Senate committees to start their own investigations into Democrats. The Beast, Sam Brody, or Sam Brody over at the Daily Beast, I should say, said, with the Senate on the eve of a vote to acquit Trump on charges that he abused his power, by withholding U.S. aid to Ukraine to secure that investigation, the Biden corruption counter case has transformed into a core concern for the president's base of supporters, many of whom now want to see the GOP-controlled Senate use its power to, quote, get to the bottom of it when the impeachment trial is over. So, Lindsey Graham, Trump sycophant, Trump suck-up that he is hearing from the base, or maybe thinks of it, they want to go after Hunter Biden now. Ooh, this is a great chance to enact revenge upon Hunter Biden and the Democrats. Base is going to eat it. And more importantly, Donald Trump's going to love it. Oh, he talks about Hunter Biden all the time. Yes, this is another way that I can get even closer to my new daddy, Donald Trump. Unfortunately, that seems like that's the situation here, honestly, with Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump. He is somebody, he's like a lamprey that just kind of sticks itself to a shark. And that's a pretty apt comparison. Feeding on the detritus that he leaves behind. Gross. Anyway, but that's Lindsey Graham. So now the problem is, according to Brody, on Capitol Hill, the appetite for a sweeping probe into the Bidens and Burisma appears limited, even among staunch Republican defenders of the president. Now remember, this is not the base that I'm talking about here. These are congressmen, the same congressmen that are going to vote to acquit him, the same congressmen who, by the way, and you know, people like Lamar Alexander, for example, right, or even Marco Rubio, who basically admit, yeah, the president did something inappropriate in Ukraine, but we don't think it's impeachable. Or, I mean, you know, we think it's maybe impeachable, but we're not going to do that anyway because too much disruption, right? We got reasons, so we're not gonna go in that direction. And they're also saying, hey, let's not go back into Ukraine. We just got out of that mess, so why do you want to dive back into it? That doesn't make any sense. So now here's the thing, too. If they do decide to go back into it, which would be insane, in order to go after Hunter Biden or Donald Trump's perceived enemies, for one, that's going to be, I guess, more evidence against them. In reality, doing an actual witch hunt, right? And two, they're not going to find anything illegal, right? Now, what Hunter Biden did was unethical, absolutely. He got paid a ton of money to sit on a board of a company in the hopes, of course, and the company basically hopes that, hey, if we hire their son, we pay him $50,000 a month, though that's going to give us kind of a little bit of influence, give us a line to maybe Joe Biden, right? So it seems like your run-of-the-mill type of corruption, right? And unfortunately, we seem to have that everywhere. It's not just in Ukraine, it's in America too. So we have all that sorts of corruption. But let me give you a timeline here to show also what they're going to find if they ever do an investigation to Hunter Biden. Back in 2014, Hunter Biden joined the board of Burisma, which was then currently, at that time, currently involved in a corruption scandal, right? So now authorities in Ukraine, Britain, and the United States all opened investigations into the company's operations to see if there is actual corruption going on. Now, this is, again, Hunter Biden was there. A year later, Viktor Shokin became Ukraine's prosecutor general. So now that's the prosecutor that Biden later on pushed out. Now, the thing about Shokin is that he said he came in saying, I'm going to take on corruption. I'm going to investigate Burisma. So what happened in the investigation? Nothing. The investigation literally went dormant under Viktor Shokin, meaning he was not doing his job. He wasn't actually going after corruption. So now Biden gets in there with his son working at that company, right? Or sitting on the board of that company. Biden joined with other officials internationally to call for Mr. Shokin's ouster. Biden removed the guy who was supposed to investigate Burisma for not investigating Burisma. Literally the opposite of what Republicans, Trump supporters, Trump's base are actually alleging on this issue. If you launch a Senate investigation into that, that is what you're going to find because those are the facts. It's going to be another Fast and Furious, right? Where Republicans were launching investigation after investigation, or even another Benghazi, investigation after investigation after investigation, 9 investigations, and they found nothing wrong. But they keep doing it. And now you've got Republicans that are saying, you know what, maybe we shouldn't climb into that rat hole just so soon after getting out of it. Maybe that'd be smart. But again, if you investigate Biden, then that's what you're going to find. Go ahead. Waste your time, waste our tax money. In fact, I actually don't want you to do that because that is a waste of time and tax money. But maybe it'll get you away from, I don't know, like doing even more terrible things at the border. Who knows, right? But hey, you know what? If you want to shine a light on corruption and on corporations hiring the children of political figures in order to use that to gain influence over said figures, well then, okay, I'm in favor of that, actually. Yeah, I know I keep changing my mind, but because there are good sides and there are good sides. The only bad side is the waste of taxpayer money. And for the Republican congressmen, the bad side is they probably engage in the same corruption as well. So yeah, go ahead. Let's do this. Let's launch an investigation into every child of a political figure that has ever gotten a sweetheart job. Hey, let's start with Rudy Giuliani's son. I don't think Republicans want to jump down that hole, likely because, again, they'll never make it out. So now, I mentioned Rand Paul earlier. Now, Rand Paul, get a load of this quote. He said, I think we should all hold hands in a big circle, sing Kumbaya, and quit all the stupid investigations. We can end all this. We can do these endless recriminations forever, and even if we want, and ever if we want. I think people are tired of the damn impeachment. Why can't we start talking about some things we could do to help the country, you know? Oh man, those are some great words for the guy who just literally doxed the whistleblower. Again. Releasing his public information. By the way, the reason that that's important is because that potentially puts that whistleblower in danger. Remember, Donald Trump may be getting acquitted. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have a bone to pick with the person that is responsible for starting the impeachment trial in the first place. Of course he does. He's going to go after his political enemies, and that is one of them. So what are you doing? What are you doing? Rand Paul, guy should be put in jail for that. Seriously. Now, there's more. Senator James Lankford said, quote, I don't think there should be a tremendous long-term protracted something unless something is there. Basically saying there's nothing there. Admitting nothing there when they talked about Graham's proposal. Uh, Brody also noted that there appears to be a limited interest in a Senate investigation into the whistleblower complaint as well. That sparked interest in the impeachment inquiry. Another core concern for the president's base. So now Rand Paul keeps doxing the whistleblower, right? Irresponsibly. And I cannot stress how irresponsible that is. And yet, these Republicans, they're like, we actually really don't care about the whistleblower. I mean, they didn't care enough to try to call him the whistleblower in, which is what Trump supporters really, really want. Donald Trump himself, they really, really wanted that. And they wanted Hunter Biden. But these senators know that it would basically amount to nothing. Even Rand Paul, even while doing this performance art that he is doing in doxing a whistleblower. And again, it is dangerous performance art, indeed. Now, let me go back to Brody here. He adds, the path ahead for the Senate GOP then is fraught. After a hard-won fight to defeat Trump's impeachment, they will have to balance ramped-up pressure from an aggrieved GOP base, hungry for revenge, with weary senators' desire to leave everything Ukraine behind. So now I get to my problem with the impeachment trial, right? Why did the Democrats decide to make it all about Ukraine? They could have nailed him with all the different ways that Trump was corrupt and had served himself while being in office. It's not like there isn't evidence of that. It's not that there isn't allegations of Donald Trump basically self-dealing. Use it. Use it. But unfortunately, like Republicans, Democrats seem to afraid to probe too deeply into personal or systemic corruption. And it makes you kind of wonder why that is. Maybe it's because they also benefit from that corruption. So I think this is a Republican Party basically saying, hey guys, look, impeachment's pretty much over. Donald Trump survived. We of course, were never going to vote in favor of impeachment. So let's just get back to normal. And by normal, I mean ripping off regular working people. And which makes me wonder, of course, if the Democrats are more than happy to go back to the same things as well. The answer is probably yes. I don't think impeachment or Ukraine will be brought up after the end of impeachment. I don't. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I don't think so. Speaking of the Democrats, actually, you know what? I'm going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back, read some super chats, thank some members, thank patrons, and then we've got two final stories here we're going to talk about, and then we'll end the show. All right, guys. So we'll see you in a couple minutes. Stay right here. Around the Nation. We'll be back.
Mike Pence.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so first, I want to thank some patrons. I want to thank Alex Clayton Kerr and C. Innocent. So thank you. We don't have any new channel members, but if you want to become a channel member, please do so by hitting the join button below. Support independent progressive media. Again, there are different ways to do so. Let's see. There also is a super chat here from Obi Alfred. Says Yellow Vest America permanently suspended on Twitter after calling for Tom Perez to resign in investigations into Mayor Cheat. Yeah, I know that guy. I followed him. I love that guy. Here we go. Purging of leftist Twitter accounts. I know it. Progressives. I mean, yeah, we're always getting look, I know somebody on Twitter, Beth, who always seems to get like suspended off Twitter for saying things, and saying things that aren't necessarily bad to begin with. It's just outrage. But then they go after left wing accounts all the time. I know conservatives are like, oh no, Facebook and Twitter, they hate conservatives. Well, generally it's because conservatives tend to tweet out like death threats and horrible stuff, whereas progressives just challenge powerful people. And so we get suspended for that. It's insane. But thank you for letting me know about that. Then we've got Koru, member comment here, who asked, do you think anybody remembers that Donald Trump has already been impeached? He's just not going to be removed. Look, and the narrative going forward is that he's and this is going to be the conservative narrative going forward. He's innocent because he's been acquitted. Oh, Donald Trump is innocent, didn't do anything. That's what's going to stick in people's minds. Well, he didn't get impeached, yeah, but like Bill Clinton, he got off. So nothing wrong. So I guess he didn't do it. Again, people. I'm not going to say people are stupid because I don't think they are, but people don't have time to pay attention. People don't have time to get into the nuances. A lot of people didn't understand what impeached means. I think a lot of people conflate the removal part with the impeachment part. And so, all you have to do is just like, actually, no, impeachment just means you're filing articles and then you're doing a trial. And then people understand because people know what a trial is. And, but for the uninitiated, right, for people who are not involved in politics and don't have really time to pay attention to it, they're going to be more receptive to I don't know, like I heard Donald Trump got impeached, but then he got off. So I guess he just must not have done it, must be innocent or something. I don't know. And that's going to be the extent of the conversation unless they're actually talking to somebody who actually knows more about the process. And so I'm afraid that will be the issue that, people are going to basically talk about. And unless, again, you're in the political sphere, which is actually really small, they're going to know that. But good question. Ann Anderson also says, general rule of thumb for the Trump era, no poll is to be trusted. I've seen some and they're badly skewed. You always have to look at methodology, right? I think the biggest problem with polling that I've seen is how they do it in certain ways. They do it mainly with landlines, so that tends to reach a more older demographic, right? Generally more older, more conservative demographic, but more likely voters, right? Because likely voters are people who generally are home during the day, who answer their phones. I don't know about you, but as a millennial, I do not answer basically for any number I don't know. I let it go straight to voicemail and then ignore it. I don't think I've ever opened my voicemail. So if you try to get a hold of me, you're going to have a bad time. And most millennials are like that, especially with, so many people in student loan default, right? You're not going to want to answer a call if it's a bill collector, right? Which a lot of Americans have to face. And so No, generally people who answer their phones have landlines, are older, conservative, more likely voters. And by the way, even if you don't even fit in that category, and you're somebody who's just like interested in politics, or not even interested in politics, but actually has free time during the day to answer the phone and then take a poll. Well, I mean, you're not even necessarily going to be interested in taking that poll. You might even not have time. So there's so many different factors involved with actually getting a good polling sample. But the ones who generally have the time and the ability to do so, and the interest in answering those questions, being somewhat politically involved, well, those people tend to get called more often. And so you build up this base of people. And what the polls ignore are likely vote or unlikely voters. They focus on likely voters, not on unlikely voters. That's why the skews, or I'm sorry, the polls in 2016 were so skewed against Donald Trump, because they didn't count those unlikely voters, and the whole system is set up not to poll populists correctly, and so you don't know how many unlikely voters are going to show up for a populist. You generally do with an establishment candidate, but not, and that's where polling fails when you have populist candidates, fake populists, like Donald Trump, and real populists like Bernie Sanders, and that's where just polling just kind of falls apart. And so you're right in that there are badly skewed polls as well, and there's just a failure with the methodology. Okay, all right. Pranay says conservatives are just liars, Jeff, and his mom says they know. They know. They know. Let's see. Thomas Rittenhouse adds in shadows filled with former Hillary Pumas and campaign surrogates. These are actually former Obama and Clinton staffers. And so, I mean, you're right that there are people inside shadow that are shady, at least when it comes to being politically unbiased. And so you are right about that. Okay. I think we should get back to this here. So let's go with that Tom Perez story. See if there are any more of these. Okay. Now, following the disaster that is the aftermath of the Iowa caucuses, DNC Chairman Tom Perez is facing calls to step down. This is after, of course, again, that the whole conflagration with the Iowa caucus that points at possible party mismanagement, which caused the delay of results in the first contest in the 2020 Democratic primary. We are still currently, as of this taping, waiting the results that will be released in about an hour and a half. But only half of those results will be released. So now, following this, multiple petitions on change.org have called for Perez to resign his position as chair of the DNC. One of the most popular ones had about 13,000 signatures. Now, that's earlier this morning. There's plenty more. Not only that, but resign Tom Perez had also trended on Twitter overnight. So there's a lot of people that are very unhappy about the job that Tom Perez is doing as head of the DNC. So now let's go to Common Dreams here. This is an article by Owen Higgins, and he explains that while Perez and the DNC were not technically in charge of the process Monday night, the National Party's influence on the process likely led to the caucus meltdown. They explained that top party levels officials' concerns about Russian interference in 2016 have created a cottage industry of technology security experts offering protective services for elections. And I say experts because, as you can see, the so-called experts at Shadow kind of messed up. And there was actually a statement released from the Iowa Democratic Party that said basically it was an error in the code, right? It was a coding error. They were receiving all the information, but they were not sending it all out because of coding error inside of this app. So learn to code is the message here. And that's why you cannot trust, by the way, the cottage industry. But this is, I think, is a good example of incompetence and self-dealing. And so I'll explain that, right? Now, this phone app used in Iowa is called Shadow, or I'm sorry, it's developed by Shadow Incorporated. And it was very secretive. According to an article in the Gray Zone, the firm was staffed by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama campaign veterans and created by a Democratic dark money nonprofit backed by hedge fund billionaires, including a man named Seth Klarman. Seth Klarman is a prolific funder of pro-settler Israel lobby organizations, as well as a large Democratic donor. Klarman has contributed directly to Pete Buttigieg's campaign. Shadow was also funded by, again, the Buttigieg campaign, the Nevada Democratic Party, which has since, by the way, announced that it will not be using the app in the upcoming Nevada caucus. So we're not going to have that kind of disaster, hopefully, in Nevada. Okay, so back to Perez, right? So he's leading the DNC. The DNC, I guess, contracted with Shadow, which, again, is a good example of corrupt self-dealing with all these different connections with the Buttigieg campaign. For his role in this, as well as changing debate rules, a lot of activists, of course, have been pushing for Perez's ouster. Now, on Friday, news that the DNC was going to adjust its debate rules to allow billionaire Mike Bloomberg onto the stage drew outrage and accusations that the party was allowing a billionaire to come in and buy his way into the election. Bloomberg, just several days before the rules change, gave over $300,000 to the DNC. Now, Sean King, activist, said, "I'll be glad to see Tom Perez step down from the DNC. After a clusterfuck of an election in the state that the DNC had a year to prepare for, that was preceded by the DNC changing its rules for the billionaire to buy his way into the race. The man has lost the respect of millions. I don't really think he had any respect to begin with." Ever since Tom Perez was chosen to run, by the way, in an election for DNC chair that Keith Ellison, by all rights, was going to win. He was pushed into the running by Obama and Clinton, staffers, people who had worked on their campaigns to go and take over the DNC to make sure that Ellison, a Sanders delegate and Sanders supporter, did not win that position. But don't worry, Ellison got the vaunted position of co-chair, which basically has no power. Or I think either co-chair or a position that they had invented to placate Mr. Ellison. So there's that. Now, Sanders supporter and Democratic Party activist Kat Bretzler also echoed King's concerns and emphasized the damage the DNC was doing to its own self. Quote, "The Democratic establishment has been screaming that our movement is sowing divisiveness and it's going to ruin party unity, but they're nailing that to the wall all by themselves." Changing rules for the DNC threshold for debate access to allow billionaires, but not POC candidates, and this. Now remember, Cory Booker, Julian Castro, they all talked to the DNC to try to adjust their rules so that the debate stage included at least one candidate of color, right? Well, the DNC refused, Perez refused, but now, after 8 debates, now Tom Perez is saying, "Oh, you know what? We are going to change our debates. We're going to change the threshold so we can have a billionaire come and be on the stage." And by the way, Mike Bloomberg, again, gave $300,000 several days before this. And Mike Bloomberg, since Biden was mostly considered to be the next one to fail, right? At least when it comes to Iowa, and not do well in Iowa. And we don't have the official results yet, but there's likely he's going to be in 4th or 5th place in Iowa. It's a disaster, right? So nobody has any faith in Joe Biden. And so Bloomberg is the next, I guess, best hope. Bloomberg or Buttigieg, somebody. Now, Buttigieg is going to do terribly with black voters. He's going to get crushed in South Carolina. And so, really, the major hope is Bloomberg. And yet, Bloomberg also has a terrible past when it comes to, for example, policies like stop and frisk. But he hasn't been nailed with that yet. So, getting him in the debate is actually probably going to be bad. And there are a lot of DNC members that are actually against this as well. So there are a lot of DNC members that are like, hey, this is not a good look for us either. And so maybe they would be on to supporting removing Tom Perez as DNC chair. Not sure. I hope so. But anyway, one more statement here. This is Vice Senior Staff writer Laura Wagner, who said, the lesson is that the party will stymie Sanders' chances one way or another, and the Vermont senator's supporters will need to accept the need to fight on a number of fronts to succeed. I think she's right. Quote, the DNC is corrupt and incompetent, or both, and if Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, it will be in spite of the party's leadership. Absolutely. She's not wrong. And look, if I've learned one thing, is that people in power, they don't give up their power easily. And while we don't know entirely what happened in Iowa, if it was a conspiracy to stop Bernie or pure incompetence or just a case of self-dealing gone wrong with a company that wasn't obviously up to the task, what's clear is that all of this happened on Tom Perez's watch. And that's just another piece of evidence why Tom Perez should not be DNC chair. Mastermind says Perez is appointed to a seat, not nominated. Yeah, that's true. He was appointed DNC chair. Okay, let's see. Jup James says Iowa was just the app in early access. Ugh. Early access. It just makes me think of Steam and how terrible some of the early access games are. Okay, anyway. And let's move on. One more story here. Bernie Sanders surrogate and national campaign co-chair Nina Turner got into a little bit of a fight on the MSNBC set when she went after Mike Bloomberg as an oligarch. Take a look.
You think Mike Bloomberg's an oligarch? Come on.
He is. I mean, he skipped Iowa. Iowans should be insulted, not going to New Hampshire, buying his way into this race, period. The DNC changed its rules. They didn't change it for Senator Harris. They wouldn't change it for Senator Booker. They didn't change it for Secretary Castro. They changed it for
Did he buy his way into the debates?
Absolutely he did, and it is a stain on democracy. But back to your point, money can buy you, it can't buy you love. It can get you some likes, though. It can get you a whole lot of likes. But the way that Senator Bernie Sanders is going to win this election is by building a grassroots movement, and that is exactly
starting tonight. You're going to win tonight?
Starting tonight.
All right. I love Nina Turner. So she's absolutely fantastic. She's not afraid to call it what it is. He's buying his way onto the debate stage and prevented people of color from being involved in the debate stage. So if you actually care about representation and representation of different ideas, well, then you should be pretty angry at this rule change that allows a billionaire to force his way into the debate stage. And that's, by the way, after reaching these higher poll numbers from blanketing the area with ads. Blanketing, you cannot swing a stick without hitting a Michael Bloomberg ad. Terrible analogy, but you get what I mean, right? You can't do anything. So now, look, I love By the way, I love how Chris Matthews is literally shocked and chagrined, right? At the idea. Like, are you calling Michael Bloomberg an oligarch? Yeah. Yeah, she is. She's right, too. Now, the other person that is shocked and chagrined here is actually Dr. Jason Johnson, who is an MSNBC contributor and somebody who is not exactly a fan of Bernie Sanders or supporters. I'm actually currently blocked on Twitter for an unknown reason. Now, he weighed in on this. Take a look.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable. I disagree with a lot of things Mike Bloomberg has done as a mayor. But oligarchy, in our particular terminology, it makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system. Mike Bloomberg is just a rich guy. America is full of rich guys. And just because you're rich doesn't mean that you're an oligarch who abuses his power. The power that Mike Bloomberg got access to was given to him by the voters of New York. So I think using that common term, fine. It's great in the Iowa caucuses, and the Bernie, the supporters are going to love that sort of thing, but it ain't the kind of language that you should be using. I think it's dismissive. I think it's unfair. And it's the kind of thing that blows up in your face if you become the nominee and you have to work with Mike Bloomberg 3 or 4 months from now. And that's the issue that Sanders people never seem to want to remember.
Wait. Why would Bernie Sanders have to work with Michael Bloomberg 3 to 4 months down the line if he wins the nomination? What are you talking about? So I don't quite understand that. But look, this is language policing, right? You better not say oligarch, because that has certain connotations going back to the Russians. Can't say that. Cannot call him a Russian. No. Only we can call Sanders and his supporters Russians. But look, it's ridiculous, right? Because let's look into what an oligarchy is. So let me get you the actual definition of oligarchy. Oligarchy is a form of power structure in which power rests with a small number of people. These people may be distinguished by nobility, wealth, education, or corporate, religious, political, or military control. So now, is the United States an oligarchy? I would say yes. And so right now, you have a small group of people with lots and lots of money that have massive political influence over policy. And see, I can prove this because you have a study going back earlier, last decade, okay? This is 2012, 2013. This comes out. This is done by political scientists Martin Gillens at Princeton and Benjamin Page of Northwestern University. Now, they looked at basically two groups, rich people versus everybody else, right? And they looked at how the government responds to the needs of those different groups. And that what they found is that the United States is an oligarchy where economic elites and organized interest groups play a substantial part in affecting public policy. So if you are rich or if you are a special interest group, then generally our politicians tend to listen to them far more often than regular people when it comes to policy. In fact, the general public, according to the study, has little or no independent influence on policy. It is statistically insignificant. Now, if that does not scream oligarchy, I don't know what does. It is the minority, in this case, wealthy people, wealthy donors, the donor class, that influence our politicians, who are also incredibly wealthy and entrenched in a system of money and politics that rule the majority. The only way that poor people, regular people, working people, get their policy positions met is if a special interest or a wealthy interest also agrees with that. So that's why we generally can't do anything when it comes to economics or healthcare, right? And so, I mean, that's generally what an oligarchy is. It's the definition. And Michael Bloomberg is incredibly wealthy. He is literally self-funding his entire campaign with his $60 billion fortune. And so, look, I hate to break it to Jason Johnson, but you're wrong. He is an oligarch. So, and besides, even under his interpretation, sans the oil money, and I love how he has to be specific, right? Well, I mean, in my point of view, the way that I understand oligarchy is that you have to be a rich Russian in oil in order to be called an oligarch. Well, I just showed you the definition, the dictionary definition of oligarch. I'm sorry that it means a different word to you, but in reality, in the actual definition of the word, it means something else. It means that people like Bloomberg are oligarchs. Now, is that used as a pejorative today? Sure. I guess you could say that it is in the case of Bernie Sanders supporters and people who actually enjoy democracy. So is she using it as a pejorative? I suppose so. I'll agree with that, right? But it doesn't make it any less true. I mean, again, taking advantage of a broken political system is exactly what many wealthy Americans do in our system of money and politics. I mean, who do you think broke it in the first place? You had Ronald Reagan. You had conservative majority in the Supreme Court. You had these two decisions, Buckley-Valeo and Bellotti versus First Bank, right? That basically set up the system where money is considered political speech and that corporations are people who then can give unlimited political speech to politicians. They set up this system that allowed the flood of money into our political system, that allowed super PACs, bundlers, billionaire donors, et al. To dominate our politics. Not only that, but it brought us people like Donald Trump. Trump was 30, 40 years in the making. Why? It's because he's a fake populist. You set up a situation where the establishment has so much power and so much influence, and the voices of regular, everyday working people are silenced, and people are being crushed with enormous amounts of debt, student loan debt, mortgage debt, because there's not enough wages to go around, so that people keep having to borrow money in order to afford actual living, right? Well, you're going to set up a system where these people are feeling disempowered, and they're going to turn to a demagogue, or more likely to turn to a demagogue like Donald Trump, who says, well, your problems are the black people, your problems are the Mexicans, your problems are the Muslims. Don't worry, I can fix your problems. That's fake populism. That kind of system sets up fake populists. All right. But of course, if you call, people who perpetuate that system, people like Mike Bloomberg, oligarchs, well, that's just not fair. That is an unfair implication, and also might even be slightly anti-Semitic. And that's another thing that I thought about. So, look, Michael Bloomberg, he's Jewish, right? So if you call him an oligarch, well, that's got the negative, inclination, or it's got the negative association as well with, oh, look, you're being super anti-Semitic by pointing out that he is using his power to literally buy his way into election. How dare you? How dare you? And so, believe me, they're going to use that. They're going to use that anti-Semitic argument as well. But again, it has nothing to do with that. It's the fact that he is using his wealth and power to buy his way into the system and push out other people, to push out working class, people that represent the working class, and also people of color. And so now, I mean, who buys their way into elections? Oligarchs. So now we get to one more video here, which I think is extremely fun. They get into a little bit of a debate, Nina Turner and Dr. Jason Johnson, and it is awesome.
It's just ironic to me that somebody would defend the wealthiest people in this country over the working people of this country. We need real campaign finance reform to the extent that a Mayor Bloomberg can totally finance his campaign. He doesn't have to go out to the people. He doesn't have to build a movement. He doesn't have to talk to people. He can buy his way. It is the same attitude that the elites, maybe Jason likes the word elite over oligarch, but it's the same attitude that the elites had in 1930 against FDR.
You work for a candidate who's part of the 1%. I have no problem with criticizing the system that allows Mike Bloomberg to make all the money that he makes, the system that allows him to buy what he wants to buy, the system that allows him to buy himself into the administration and buy himself into the debates is a problem. But to call him an oligarch, I think, is a misnomer in this environment. And again, you're working for somebody who's part of the 1%. Do you call him an oligarch? No, you don't. But at the end of the day, the enemy of this country, the enemy of the poor, is not just everybody who happens to be rich. It is a capitalistic system that abuses people. And if you want to speak about that, that's fine. But if you want to name call people, that's not going to help Bernie if he becomes a nominee, and he's going to need Mike Bloomberg's money.
I'm not name calling anywhere.
If he's going to need Mike Bloomberg's money down the road.
It's ironic that you're defending somebody that is buying his way through the democracy. Yes, you are.
I know this
you are
works on Twitter because that's how you guys operate. But when it comes to actual campaign politics, it makes sense to actually describe people for the positions that they have.
Is this about a word? Is this about a word, Jason? Is this about a word?
No, it's not just about a word. It's about the implications of it. And it's about criticizing the system versus criticizing individuals. Like I said, I wouldn't call Bernie Sanders an oligarch, and he happens to be part of the 1%. I would say he's somebody who's wealthy, but who's dedicated himself to trying to uplift people who are poor.
He just got there at the age of 78 years old.
Okay.
All right. Oh, wait. I think we're back. Okay. So, we had some tech issues there. My program completely froze up after that video. But let's get back into it, right? So Jason Johnson basically made the argument right there that I mean, you shouldn't use that word. You can't use the word oligarch when while talking about Michael Bloomberg. Can't do that. Now, if you want to talk about the system, and by the way, he does make some pretty good points, right? About how there is a system that is messed up, right? The problem is, who do you think perpetuates that system? Who do you think messes up that system? It's the people with the money. It's the people that are literally buying their way into the debates, and other ways that they influence elections. And so, look, that is the large problem here. But then there's and look, you can have a good argument about that, a good discussion. But notice what he does as well. Oh, Bernie's part of the 1%. Isn't he an oligarch? Oh, really? Well, look, that's kind of a weak sauce argument, right? Because oligarchs use their money to maintain power. Now, look, he says later on, of course, when he's doing the crosstalk with Nina Turner, he's like, well, look, Bernie Sanders, you wouldn't call him an oligarch because he actually is using his money to try to uplift people, right? To be fair, right? And so he's pointing that out. But at the same time, well, then you wouldn't call him an oligarch. But what is Michael Bloomberg doing? I don't think he's trying to lift other people up. No, he's trying to become president himself so that, I believe, so he can try to take down Bernie Sanders. And so that's the big problem here. Michael Bloomberg literally wants to stop Bernie Sanders from becoming president, and he wants to protect his tax cuts. That's what this is about. He wants to protect tax cuts. He does not want to be taxed more for his money. But Jeff, you don't understand. Michael Bloomberg gives a lot of money to charity. And charity's a tax write-off. Literally, you pay less taxes when you give more money to charity. And then, of course, it helps your PR. But Michael Bloomberg has a lot of problems. He used to be an independent. He used to be a Republican. And have some very conservative policies. When he was mayor of New York, he didn't help homelessness. Stop and frisk was an absolute disaster. He's got an awful record, abysmal record. And so, I don't think word policing is going to help in this case. And so I just find like it's just really strange hill to die on. Jason Johnson had picked. So I don't know. But I do want to go to Nina Turner, right? Who, by the way, is always amazing. And I want to give her credit because, for one, putting up with this ridiculous word policing, right? I mean, at some point, like, he's talking over her and whatever. It's like, and she's just trying to make her point, right? And she's not going to use a new word just because somebody like Jason Johnson, or more importantly, somebody like Michael Bloomberg is upset about it. And so, look, I absolutely love Nina Turner, and she's a fantastic surrogate, and she's 100% right. Just call it what it is. We live in an oligarchy, and that's exactly what Bernie Sanders is trying to solve. Okay. All right. That's it. That's all we've got today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. I apologize again for the tech issues. I have no idea what happened, and I hope it doesn't ruin my video clips. We'll see what happens. Editing is going to be really, really fun today. All right. Thank you, guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys later. Please consider becoming a patron or a channel member to support independent progressive media. Maybe I can get myself a new computer one day. All right. Thank you.
Please clap.
Wait. You're getting nervous, man.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.